we're also going to be supplementing this with some lessons from A Course in Miracles. For those of you who are or have been ACIM students or teachers, you will like the way this is done. Let me know when you're done screenshotting, and we will work this through for this first one. Did you guys get it? You're done? Okay. You've heard me teach this so many times, but sometimes when we teach it in a really upfront way and talk about what this practically looks like in our lives, it can be more juicy and palpable for us. And here are the other half, 9 through 18. So let me know when you're finished screenshotting this. For those of you who like to take notes, it's just easier to pull out your phone and, do a little screenshot, okay? But I'm going to run through it anyway. But we have to start here by understanding what illusions are literally running our illusory world. Did everybody get that second one? Okay. The first one is, as you can imagine, safety. The biggest illusion of control that we have, that we base our entire creative lives upon in this dualistic universe, has to do with our safety. Everything that we think about is based upon whether or not we're safe and whether or not we will be safe. And we only tend to make decisions in the first mansion of the soul, or if you like the penthouse analogy and metaphor, you can look at it as the first floor of your penthouse. In that first mansion of your soul, everything is about trying to stay safe, right? Be thinking about that. What do you hold on to so thoroughly that keeps you safe in your life? Whether it be a thought, an idea, thanks, babe, a belief that you have, anything like that, type it up in chat and we'll talk it through. The second thing has to do with the senses. What I see, what I hear, what I feel, and what I touch. So that whole seeing is believing concept is the very first mansion of the soul's castle problem. We won't have faith unless something has been implemented from a belief that keeps us safe. And we won't believe the belief without seeing it, being able to hear it from an authority figure, being able to feel and touch the actual belief, which is an illusion to begin with. Does that make sense? The third thing that we do, once we have determined what our beliefs are based upon, number one, what is safe, number two, what we can see in evidence, what we can hear in evidence, feel and touch in our visceral experience, and therefore evidence, we then call fact or truth. You following me? That's number three. It's truth. The fourth thing that we do, once we have determined what is safe, what we can evidence via our senses, and what is a truth for us, we then create a meaning or significance to that truth. So number four is meaning and significance. For example, we'll say, it's true that I am a blank, a teacher, a healer, a channel, a firefighter, a doctor, a litigator. And that means blank. Now, typically you'll put something in there like, I am supposed to blah. Right? Which means, like for spiritual teachers, you might say, I have to be an exemplary human being and not make any mistakes. Ever. Yeah, it won't work. If you're a healer, you will say these things that aren't even true, like, I must heal myself first. To a certain extent, maybe, but how much meaning and significance are you going to place upon that when you believe that you're the one performing the healing? You're just the vessel, right? The fifth thing that we do when it comes to illusions of control, we create valuation systems. We will determine what we value based upon the meaning that we have placed upon truths in our lives that we have evidenced and that keep us safe. You see what I did there? We went backwards from 5 to 1. We create valuation systems, right, based upon meaning and significance that we have made of what we believe is truth because we have evidenced it through the 5 senses. Why did we do that? Because we want to feel safe. It all goes back to that safety when you think about illusions of control. And then we place things in a certain construct that we call time. We take those valuation systems even more deeply into a realm of illusion. We make ourselves even more insane because we say, well, I evidenced that in the past. That might look good in the future, right? And then finally, by the time we get down to number 7, shit starts to fall apart and fear becomes implemented. This is very first mansion of the soul stuff, because when you're upset over something, you say, I'm upset that what I expected to happen because of what I've evidenced, because of what has kept me safe, because of what I formerly saw or heard or felt or knew, which I thought was true, which had this meaning, which had this valuation system in the past, and it's not working right now. I am afraid for my future. So the very first fear that we experience in life is actually fear of our future. We fear the future before it even lands. I like to call that fearful of nothing. We're afraid of a ghost. If you're afraid of your past, you're afraid of a ghost. If you're afraid of your future, it's like being afraid of an angel. And would that be an angel of deliverance itself? Would it be an angel of faith to show you something that's out of your control and how your faith can bring you seemingly out of fear, at least for a time? I know we're going pretty deep with that one, but we typically say in number 7, I am upset over something that happened in the past, something that hasn't happened yet and might. That's called catastrophizing. I'm upset over the meaning and valuation systems I've created from what I formerly thought was true when I evidenced it in my senses, which, by the way, are very limiting because I was trying to be safe. Notice how we keep going backward? It all adds up and it creates fear. And you're upset over something that has either already happened or hasn't happened yet because of all those valuation systems, right? And then number 8, then we go into resistance. Resistance looks like, I'd rather know that I'm safe. Notice I put, I'd rather know 1 through 7 instead of divine truth. I'd rather know that I'm safe. I'd rather trust what I can see, hear, feel, touch, and know in my mind. I'd rather trust what has been evidenced from my senses or someone else's as truth. I'd rather trust and know my meaning and significance, my valuation systems, what has happened in my past, or what I believe should be happening in my future. I would rather know 1 through 7 as my compass of my soul instead of divine truth. That's called resistance. All right. Then we start talking about power. And the choice at that point in time is that we want power over the unseen. We want power over divine love. What was meant to be by now is power of love itself taking control, but we want power over things because we feel in power under. Number 10, the illusion of control thereafter. Typically, we start getting older and we think about whether or not we want to have kids. If we have a near-death experience, we think about the concept of being born at all. We think about past lives. We think about birth and all concepts of birth. And we think about death, when we're going to die. Other people around us start dying. And our concepts of birth and death become very visceral. And then we get sick. Do you notice that I didn't put birth and death first on the list? Right? That is because it took a lot of thought systems building up that were untrue to actually make birth and death become very real for the adult mind. Do you notice how when you think about people dying around you, like when your parents die, that's a really big journey when our parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles pass? Because we're finally realizing that death might be a true thing, and it scares the crap out of us. We become very upset over it because we think about our own mortality. Why are we upset over it? Because the heart becomes upset over holding on to truths that don't exist, over holding on to illusion as truth. The heart becomes very upset, and then we grieve. And guess what? All of the grief that we have over birth or death becomes dis-ease. Notice I didn't say disease. Disease would be like, I think you're making yourself sick. I said you are at a dis-ease. You are operating in what my teacher would call woundology, right? Because there's no reward for healing. There's no incentive to heal in a modern world. The incentive for being at disease or diseased in the body is so great when it comes to all the fears and conditions that you had formerly. The incentive to just stay sick is actually easier than healing. Sad but true, right? Woundology. And we start to operate based upon woundology. Don't believe me? Go sit at a restaurant. Go to the mall. See strangers who kind of know each other a little bit and haven't seen each other in a while, meet out in a public place, and they go, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you again. I heard from so-and-so who heard from so-and-so that your wife has cancer and that it's a bad one. And you know what? I understand that because I went through cancer, or I understand that because I lost someone from cancer. And our only way to palpably feel compassion is when we're sick. Is when someone dies or when someone is born. I'm not saying that's good or bad or the right way or the wrong way. That's just how the human structure operates. But it is an illusion. I'll explain why later. Unworthiness. We then start to feel like, why do I have to be sick? Have you ever done that? Unworthiness. And on the opposite side of that, who is worthy of being sick and who isn't? It's whenever a great disaster happens. You look at great droughts or floods or, the tsunami that occurred in Thailand really affected me. It got me. I was almost succumbing to that illusion. I was like, holy cow, people are dying over there. And I heard my colleagues, and these aren't, just beginning school initiates. These are like well advanced adepts talking to each other, and they're like, oh my gosh, they don't deserve that. Do you see how worthiness steeps into our every comment together when we see disaster and tragedy and death and disease on a grand scale? When we see scarcity, like poverty, on a grand scale, when we see COVID on a grand scale, whatever it is that we see, we go, oh my gosh, they don't deserve that. And the Lilith in me, by now there is one, right? She came out and she flew out of my mouth. I could not contain her. I really wanted to, but she before I could stop her, she's off to the races. And she said, So as opposed to what? Them being worthy of it? What do you want me to do? Do you guys want to gather all the rapists and murderers and, people who did horrendous things and put them all on the island and tell the tsunami just to wipe them out instead? Right? Or when you think about third world countries, you'll say, oh my gosh, then they deserve everything that we have. Okay, but if we put that based upon deservingness for first world and third world countries, of course they deserve water. It's not about deserving or not. We don't have reasons for that are within the constructs of our understanding. We can't reason that away in the logos. It's beyond us. So to put deserving and worthy into that component calls for a deep ache, an aching at the soul level that just eats your soul. It just, and for you advocates out there, it drives you to do something about it, and you do. And that's why that drive exists, right? So I can't say that drive shouldn't be there, right? But this is just me explaining the constructs of the mind that prevent you from accessing the truth and the depth of your soul. All right. So unworthiness, it's an illusion. Worthiness is as well, because it's just not why stuff happens. And then when those horrible things happen, we say, oh my gosh, God has forsaken me. God has abandoned me. Everyone I love has betrayed me. I am alone. If you get to that place, that's a hard, hard place. If you've ever felt that way. Number 13, loneliness is an illusion. It's not possible. And then finally, you feel abasement or shame. Shame is an illusion. Once you get through that stage, what takes over are what we call acts of vengeance. We spent a lot of time on that last month. If you have questions, load them up in the Ask a Question section. But the acts of vengeance are things that we do that are just, we think they're small things. Like, I'm going to give you a big one, actually. This is an act of vengeance that when George Floyd, I'm going to go there, was lying down, and that is the only thing we saw about that. But we just, all of us knew in our archetypes of compassion, people around the world knew that was something that a police officer just shouldn't do, that's just not right, which, by the way, is number 17 on my list, right and wrong. However, it brought people together in very unusual ways. I can't breathe became a slogan that shortly thereafter became even more palpable during COVID. We will never forget that we made that so big. And then we had masks on to cover our breath after that. We wondered the power of what we can actually manifest as a collective, right? So going back to acts of vengeance, it took a long time when that police officer was finally sentenced. There were so many of you, so many, perhaps not in this class today, that said, you know what, he deserved that. That was a tremendous act. He did this, and therefore he gets death. He did this, and therefore he gets imprisonment. You do this, and therefore you get that. That's a big act of vengeance collectively. So why is that bad? I'm not going to say it is. Why is that good? It has its light and shadow side. This is not what this class is about. But how did you feel when you began to think those things? The moment those thoughts of, oh my God, that is the most terrible thing I've ever seen, and not that part. We all felt that. I know I did. That was one of the most terrible things I'd ever seen in my lifetime. And then the thoughts after that would typically come into most people's mind, the whole, something needs to happen now. Somebody needs to be punished because of it. How did you feel when that thought happened? Right? How did you, for your grandparents and great grandparents who survived Auschwitz and Dachau, how do they feel? On another hand, when Hitler finally, when that whole regime was finally brought down, they applauded the punishment. And that was well after just, billions of Jews had died. Well, after the fact, we're applauding the punishment. Do you see kind of the interesting paradox in this, and how toxic a vengeance thought can be? When you think about your neighbors in these small ways, there's another thing that happens in the human mind for acts of vengeance that are called acts of betrayal. When wrong has been done to us and we have the opportunity to right that wrong, to be compassionate, to be in a stage of grace, despite the fact that something is dreadfully painful and dreadfully unfair, which, by the way, is on this list as an illusion. All the things that make us feel really bad about human nature. When something like that happens, we have a chance momentarily, instead of being vengeful, to just do something else that we call betraying ourselves or betraying someone else. So in this one, I'm just going to give you a small one, because this can get really big and really ugly really fast, and this is not the energy I want to go towards. So I'll give you a small one. I love this example because it was given to me by my teacher, and it's so true. Someone calls you on the phone and you haven't heard from them for a long time, but they've been kind of living this life that has been selfish. Everything is about this person. And you look at them, and the only thing you see on the external is how perfect their marriage is and how perfect their kids are, and, beautiful, well-posed Instagram pictures of their food and their vacations and their everything. And then they call you. You haven't heard from them in a while. This is the type of friend you don't hear until, they need something. And then they finally do. And they call, and immediately there's tears. They're on the phone and they said, I'm so sorry that I haven't been the best friend, but I need someone right now. I'm so upset I can't even pray. I'm so upset I can't even meditate. I'm so upset because the worst thing of the worst has happened. And it could be they lost their home. It could be the husband lost the job. It could be my husband cheated on me and my marriage isn't so perfect. It could be anything devastating like that. Anything to kind of, it's like the acts of vengeance in you, that part of you that just goes, finally, I can see that you're not perfect. You just betrayed them. Just that thought. In that moment when you felt relieved that they did not live up to perfection, you just betrayed them and you. Do you see how easy it is? How insidious it is? How hidden it is? How invisible these acts of vengeance can be? And let's take it deeper. Then they say, please don't tell anyone. I have to process this first. Don't tell anyone that Mr. Perfect Husband cheated on me. And when I brag about and throw his money and power around, just cheated on me with my sister. Don't tell anyone. And you go, oh, of course. No, that's too juicy for you. You know that as soon as she hangs, you can't get rid of her quick enough. You can't get her off the phone. As soon as she gets away from you, you're going to call someone. It might be your spouse. It might be your mother. And then you'll justify that away. That is a very insidious act of vengeance. You're secretly happy for their demise. Right? So that's a big one that seems little. It hides well, but it's a big one. Okay. So let's go to what causes all this. We finally get into that's not fair, fair and unfair. It's not fair. The world never promised you that. So fair and unfair is an illusion. Right and wrong, that's not right. This is wrong. Ethics is necessary. But ethically speaking, it's not about what's happening to you or for you. It's about what's happening through you. You are responsible for how God sees through your eyes, how God speaks through your mouth, how God feels in your heart. And when you're allowing acts of vengeance thoughts to take over, you can't feel that, much less think or speak or let God see through your eyeballs. And as Teresa of Avila said so beautifully, God has only your eyes through which he sees. God only has your feet through which he walks this earth. God has your heart through which he feels. Your thoughts through which he thinks about all of the sons and daughters which also walk with you. God has only you to experience earth. That's spiritual accountability. It is a phrase that has been written out of our modern day sacred text. It is no longer there. You won't find it anywhere, that phrase. It's a part of the great forgetting. It's gone. We need it back. So you have confused right and wrong with spiritual accountability. That's it. That's all that's about. And then finally, number 18 of illusion is scarcity and lack. We all know that that's not true, but because of number 1 through 17 on that list, we can kind of understand why we believe it is. All right, let's go to safety, which was number 1 on the list. I wrote another whole list of the top